Okay, I think we can get started. So welcome everyone to the manufacturing challenges for 2022 and the strategies to handle them. So we are the Manufacturers Resource Group. We are a team of people that are dedicated to helping manufacturers. And here's the agenda for today's webinar. I will go over quickly who we are. We'll go over some introductions on the panelists. We'll go through some brief presentations just to touch on the topic at hand, and then we'll jump right to the panel discussions and we'll take questions from the audience. Jumping right in, TMRG, we're a group that's been around for almost 6 years. We've started to expand nationally because of COVID. We were originally a regional group. Now we're becoming national. And we're all subject matter experts. We spend a lot of time and effort getting good at our trade, and our focus has always been helping manufacturers. We host events like this. So if you join our LinkedIn account, connect with us on LinkedIn or join our newsletter, you will know when upcoming events are scheduled. You can also go to our website, thetmrg.com. And just a couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. And if you want to continue the conversation with any of the panelists, just feel free to connect with any of us directly after the panel discussion. Of course, before then, feel free to ask any questions. Okay, so let me go over the just quick introduction so we can get to the content. Alan, he's the business development. He has business development responsibility and client relationship management for data integration services for manufacturers. Bill is a telecommunications and technology solutions architect. He is an expert at unified communications and collaboration. Bob is a consultant who helps manufacturers reduce operating costs to create cash flow by leveraging expertise in over 40 different categories. And David, that's me, is a computer engineer who's passionate about helping manufacturers and fabricators, help them get ROI in digitization, CAD/CAM nesting, MES, ERP, and Industry 4.0. The next set of panelists, Jerry has 25 years of export, MIL, SPEC, packaging, transportation, and logistics expertise, focusing on customer retention and new business development. Michael is a financial advisor specializing in succession planning for business owners, helping them to build and execute long-term strategies. And Suresh is an executive director of Visium, a startup advisor and a technology evaluator. Okay, so let's get started. So Alan, can you jump in and
sure,
quickly touch on your topic at hand?
Absolutely. First off, Dave, I want to thank TMRG for the opportunity to be part of this panel today. Excited to be here. My name is Alan Lupus. As he mentioned, I'm the business development manager for Stone Donut. Stone Donut is an IT services company. We do custom software that specializes in helping manufacturers to face challenges with integrated solutions. So we do a lot of work in Microsoft solutions, ERP systems, work at the enterprise level and help connect systems together so that you have an integrated manufacturing environment. So one of the challenges that people have talked about quite a bit is supply chain. Supply chain disruptions have caused many manufacturers to lose customers and revenue because they just can't deliver. And there's many different reasons for that, but we're going to touch upon some of those today. For instance, if you go to your vendor and the vendor says it's going to take many months to actually get the products that you ordered rather than weeks, what do you do in that situation? There's also huge logistics problems. You've heard about containers on the West Coast that are stuck, in trucking delays. A lot of logistics issues that are going on out there. So what happens when those things are delayed as well, and your customer has certain expectations of getting their products? And the last thing is, what happens if they can't wait any longer? They're canceling orders. You're losing revenue. You might be losing a good customer for any future business. So there's a lot of different things that you have to take into consideration when you think about supply chain and how it affects your company. As a matter of fact, if you don't have a good supply chain, you could actually be out of business because it's the heartbeat of the company. It's the primary reason why companies are able to produce the products that they do. And I think it's very important that you have an integrated ERP digital supply chain to be able to pull all the data together. So when we look at all of the different issues that are related to your manufacturing, your supply chain, all that information. The question you want to ask yourself is, do you have the right information with the right people at the right time to make good decisions? So, from that respect, our company helps companies integrate your ERP along with other applications like CRM, warehouse management, your trading partners, and all of the things that are related to the supply chain so that you don't have those disruptions, or at least you can pivot and you can have options and ways to be able to mitigate some of those risks. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Okay, let's move on to Bill.
Excellent. Thanks for having me today. Thanks, David, for hosting, and look forward to helping those that have some technology challenges, or in this case, people challenges, but we solve those with technology. First off, Gibson Teldata is a technology integrator. We look for unique solutions to solve the issues and challenges facing manufacturers and other industries. One of the challenges of 2022 is, how do I find talent? Here in Indiana, where unemployment is at a record low, as well as across the country, the ability to find employees is causing manufacturing to have to cut their lines down, fewer lines running, not being able to hit quotas and requirements for delivery. So what often happens is they then turn around and go, well, I've got to have bodies on the line, so let me go and get a temp agency to backfill my staffing shortages. Now they have the temp agency sending their employees over to backfill, and you start getting your invoices and you go, wait a second, you said you sent 40 employees that week and you only really had 34. But you can't figure out why things aren't matching up, and you're struggling with what's really going on. Other issues that often come up: employees show up, they clock in, and then they disappear, and they don't relieve the previous shift for 30, 45 minutes into their shift. So now you're paying the previous shift employees overtime, and all of a sudden your employee costs now have just totally gotten out of skew. How do we track this, and how do we figure out who's really there and where are they when they are in the plant? And that's with RFID, which is a radio frequency identification, and the tracking capabilities when you deploy it with geofencing. But can definitely solve the problem and identify who's actually in the plant and where they are in the plant. So now we can track them down and maximize productivity. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And Bob?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, David, for getting this going, and it's really an honor to be a part of this team. What I'm going to talk about, the new normal, negotiating price in the post-pandemic world, ties back into what Alan and Bill both had mentioned. Curious, successful executives feel there's additional cash flow available in their supply base. We're currently experiencing a unique set of circumstances. To say that COVID-19 shook up the global supply chain is an understatement. Many businesses measure value from suppliers against themselves. Sometimes they're able to measure supplier value against competitors. Likely the best tool for measuring value from suppliers is against the street. When disruptions occur, you need to be able to take swift and decisive action. It's important to know your suppliers, know what influences their price increases. Improving transparency of supplier cost is critical. Using freight as an example, it's important to understand line haul, fuel, and accessorial charges as they influence pricing. Position yourself to rationalize what's causing supplier increases and negotiate to the lowest common denominator. Stay ahead of the curve by negotiating favorable pass-through rates to ensure suppliers are not taking advantage of increases. Another example is linerboard. Because it's produced by a small number of paper manufacturers, linerboard prices are relatively stable, but can change sharply every few months. Linerboard increases recently went up by 70% per ton, which is an 8% increase, but the street price equates to a 14% increase without negotiating favorable pass-through rates. Other commodities to consider are energy at 30.3%, gasoline at 43.6%, fuel oil at 80.5%. Even food prices have increased 9.4%, which is the most since April of 1981. Even in these times, position yourself to negotiate from a position of strength and be sure to pull all the levers. Why not leverage ERA's benchmarking data and expertise to get the best pricing, period. Thanks, David. Back to you.
Thank you, Bob. It's really good information. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go over the concept of getting good data for decision making. The biggest challenge that owners and the C-class and almost anyone that's in manufacturing has is getting good data quickly. And first question people might ask is like, why do you even need that? So I use this. This is a really good slide that shows you what we call the business intelligence scale. So hindsight is where most people are, which is just reports. You get information. It usually takes a while. Usually the data is not really good, and it tells you what happened yesterday, last week. If you get to a situation where you start to get your data good and you get it fast, then you start to move towards what's insight, which are your dashboards, real-time information. And so there, exactly what's happening. You can address this situation in real time. Your scrap numbers look bad, go take a look at it. Your OEE numbers, which are KPIs for the shop floor, look bad. Let's go find out what's going on. And then once you get good data, you get good data fast, you can start storing the data and then use that for foresight and being more predictive with the information. And this is something that one of the panelists, Suresh, will actually talk about a little bit from a different perspective. So how do so the biggest challenge is how do you get information? Usually it's two things that cause a big problem. A lot of hands touching the data. So someone types it in one place, types it in another place. So if you figure out a way to not repeat data entry, then you're in pretty good shape. How do you do that? Software. And there's a lot of different approaches. Do you use a one-size-fits-all software solution? Do you use an integrated solution, which Alan can talk more about? Or do you do some combination of that? So those are the types of things that I'll, based on the questions that you ask, we'll discuss. But the key to having good data to make good decisions is make sure you're not entering the data, having too many people touch it, and then you having access to that information quickly, which ties into using good technology. Okay, so just a quick overview on that. Let me jump to the next person.
Thanks, David. Jerry Hurd with Deutsche America. Happy to be here. I'm responsible for customer retention and new business development in the Cincinnati market. Teufel is a global German-owned organization, and we've got 5 locations here in the U.S., Cincinnati, Richmond, Indiana, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Charlotte. And our main focus is custom crating, export packaging, and military packaging. And probably the biggest challenge, at least I face day in and day out, is the continued increase in the cost of packaging supplies and how best to manage those expectations and pass those costs on to my customers. Since the onset of COVID, lumber, plastic, corrugate, tape, steel has seen multiple increases ranging from 5 to 15%, sometimes overnight, putting huge pressure on pricing strategy and impacting our margin. Demand is high and supply is strained, and I'm sure everyone working in supply chain has experienced quite a bit of frustration as a result. The best approach we have for combating these issues is utilizing our internal resources as well as our vendor partnerships, really just in an attempt to stay in front of the price increases as much as possible. It's a moving target for sure. Sometimes communication is a little lacking, but it's critical. And it's not only the communication with our vendors, but from my perspective, more importantly, it's the communication with my customers, not only on the price increases as we see them, but also on my operations capacity schedule as well. Because the last thing I really want to see is a quote expiring or subject to repricing due to my customer not knowing what our capacity is to support their purchase orders. So I try and communicate as often as possible to make sure that everyone is in the loop so we can manage expectations as adequately as possible. It's a chess match for sure, but ultimately we do right by our customers. And if I need to eat a little bit of my margin to save a relationship, that's not a problem because I value my customer success as my own success. So that's where we're at. And again, happy to be here, and back to you, Dave. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. Michael?
Michael Martins, I'm with Transamerica Financial Advisors. I work a lot with business owners in terms of succession planning. And what we wanted to cover today was there was a change in the added thing in the Secure Act back in 2019. And that opened up a lot of things for employers. And one of it was being able to not have to be part of an affinity group in order to get special pricing on their retirement plans. So pooled buying opportunity came about with lower administrative cost and lower investment costs. So out of that sprang two things, PEP plans, which are pooled employer plans. And prior to 2019, it started in 2021, is you had to have some sort of affinity with a company, you had to be part of a group, and that went away. So great opportunity. We kind of call it outsourcing. We outsource many things today. Outsourcing your retirement plans is an awesome way, first of all, to avoid lawsuits. Secondly, is perform administrative duties that perhaps somebody you're having to do that right now, it frees them up to do other things. Essentially, it's like having a plan administrator to take care of those areas that perhaps you had a company, a retirement department to do. So this is huge. We estimate that about 70% of business owners will be changing to these plans over the next 2 years. Another area I work in is key person insurance, executive bonuses. 76% of business owners say they have key folks as part of their business they couldn't do without, yet only about 23% of those actually take care of those folks. Incentivize your people, reduce your payroll cost, and you can carve out those folks that are be part of those key group without having to include everybody as part of it. So those are a couple of areas that I work in, some challenges we see today, and really see some changes in that to reduce costs. And the big one, reduce fiduciary responsibility, or it might be called lawsuits. So would love to talk to you about that. Appreciate your time. Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And Suresh?
Thank you. Thanks, David, for having me, and thanks a lot for attending today's session. I'm Suresh from Visium Technologies. We focus on data science and artificial intelligence. That's what we do. So today's topic is about the main challenges in manufacturing. One of the major challenges in manufacturing is maintenance. And what is the impact of that? The impact is too much unplanned downtime, with many other things like wrong inventory on hand, equipment not functioning optimally. The time from request to repair is long, and the machine is not getting enough lifetime, and several other inefficiencies, including productivity and all. So what is the goal? And before going to the goal, let me tell you, around $50 billion is lost in US alone because of the unplanned downtime in manufacturing. Globally, it's around, just by looking at around 72 major industries, we can see that 323 production hours, which is costing around $1 trillion in loss of revenue across the globe. So what's a goal? The goal is nothing but to reduce the downtime, effectively optimizing the efficiency of the working conditions, optimizing the production, as well as optimizing the inventory of reduced stocks, extended lifespan of the equipments, and of course the overall efficiency that can bring to the manufacturing. That's the whole idea behind it. So how do we do that? We can do it by implementing the real-time collection of data that can only be achieved by interoperability, which is achieved through the Internet of Things, as well as machine learning. So it's beyond all that. What it is nothing but a mindset from a reactive to a predictive space. So that's what we mean by the predictive maintenance. So by implementation of the Internet of Things, where we can collect the data real time and using AI and machine learning, we can really achieve that. And if anybody wants to know more about it, please connect us directly. Thank you, Dave, for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Suresh, and thanks everyone for giving that, just because I know these are pretty complicated and interesting topics. So this is kind of the panel discussion format allows us to do a deep dive. So we're looking at the Q&A section for any questions, the chat, and then we're also looking on LinkedIn Live and on the LinkedIn event. So we're kind of paying attention to anywhere questions are coming in. So the first question I have is for Alan. So Alan, why is my supply chain important and how can I respond to disruptions?
Thanks, David. I'm going to say supply chain for manufacturers is the heart of everything that you do. How you buy raw materials, how you buy tools, machines, supplies, logistics services, really everything that's involved in your production process. And without a strong supply chain, as I said earlier, you really can go out of business. So it's very critical that you have a good supply chain and you don't have disruptions. So what are some things you can do to kind of address that and mitigate some of those issues? Number one is you want to be able to have multiple sources and vendors. So instead of sourcing from one company, are there other, qualified or, and validated companies that you can work with where you have that option to be able to switch if you find out that, one of your deliveries is delayed extensively, or you can't, or there's shortages out there, which many people are going through right now. So that's one issue you need to focus on. Another one is buying locally and regionally. So a lot of manufacturers have started what's called onshoring versus going offshore for some of the components and products that they need. So are there, organizations, within the United States or within North America that are easier to get product from than maybe going to Asia or other parts of the world where they might have shortages or might have other issues going on that's going to disrupt your opportunity to be able to get the products that you need. So that's another thing to be thinking about when you talk about disruptions. A third thing is visibility.
So Alan, so maybe we can circle back to some more of the answer in the question that comes up. The next one I have is for Bill. Bill, is there something in a typical HR handbook that would be contradictory to this tracking?
Thanks for asking, David. There are a couple of things that kind of spring to mind. One is if your shop is a union shop, certainly you're going to need to work with your union steward and your employees to make sure everybody's on the same page. But specifically, if you're using a temp agency, the opportunity is they're not really your employees or the temp agency's employees. And it's allowing you to, while they're wearing their badge, know where these contractors are and if they are being productive to your plant. Because obviously you're paying a premium, and to pay a premium and not have productive employees is really, really challenging to the bottom line. When I was consulting on this project for a food manufacturer, it was costing them 6 figures a month in cost overruns. And so getting that under control was imperative to their organization.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I was just curious, Michael, do you have, because I know you kind of deal in the HR field, did you have anything to add to that, or does that make sense?
No, we're certainly see enough signs out there as you travel around now hiring. We're fighting for the best folks, and it's a good opportunity to attract those to your business.
Okay, makes sense. And then the next question is for Bob. Bob, so with inflation and all of the supply chain issues that exist in today's market, is this really a good time to negotiate price?
David, that's a great question. As a matter of fact, this question ties back to some of what Alan had said in that the global supply chain is been disrupted. It's forcing manufacturers to look to onshore sources for their products and supplies. It is a good time to negotiate because the market is so volatile. It's important to ensure that you're getting the best price based on comprehensive knowledge of market conditions using benchmark data and analytics. It's also important to consider alternative materials and products. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. And yeah, the next one is for me. What is the best way to start with the data journey? I usually say the best way is to figure out where you are today. It's kind of like when you start on a Google Drive, you know where you are, you put in your location, and then you figure out what the gap is. It's the same concept. It's different tools. The one that our company likes to use is called the digital maturity model. So it basically does an evaluation of all the technology that you have, hardware, software, all your different technology processes to figure out where you are. And then we have different steps where you say, this are the 5 steps to reaching like a true smart factory. And then you identify where are you now, what's the next step on the journey, and then figure out what the gaps are. And then usually it's just putting in some type of system that starts to take you away from paper and clipboards is where it starts. But usually it's basically like I said, Google is like, where are you now? Where do you want to go? And what's the gap that you need to cover? Okay, let me put the next question. And that is for Jerry. So Jerry, what are some of the underlying factors causing the sudden and ever-changing price increases?
And it's kind of a common theme across all of the panelists right now and through the supply chain issues. But what we see is really just the finding qualified labor and retaining good qualified folks. You're finding good people to mill that lumber or run those presses, and then the increased labor costs associated. You're paying higher wages to keep good people, and that gets passed through, unfortunately, to the price of the goods and services that you're buying. Same thing with transportation, especially of late with the ever increasing fuel rates going up and increasing maintenance costs. Again, all those costs get passed through to the price of that product. So those are 2 of the big ones that we see on a monthly basis.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Jerry. And the next one is from Michael. Our company retirement plan is costing a lot of money, and my HR department is spending too much time to administer the plan. Should I switch providers or find a simpler plan?
It's a good question. In order to attract those good quality folks and keep and retain the ones you have, one of the things is, do you have the right plan? Oftentimes there is a plan called a simple plan, requires very little expense, but can include up to 100 people as part of that plan. It may be time to look at that. But I mentioned today with these pool plans is that's going to save the employer money. It's going to save people having to work on it, his own people having to work on it. Fiduciary wise, it's going to save him money in lawsuits and things like that. That's going to save him people working on the plan. So it'll save him money in the long run. Quite often we find is that people haven't evaluated plans and they need to start doing that.
Okay, thanks, Michael. That makes a lot of sense. And then Suresh, it sounds like it's an IT person, how do we get buy-in with a new technology like AI?
It all depends on different sectors. I mean, especially now we are moving towards the smart factories and all that. It's a step-by-step process where we need to first make the factory interoperable. That's a key for it. And once we introduce that interoperability and into an integrated system, we can easily move into that AI space, which is not difficult. In terms of introducing AI, it's a question of real-time data with the machine learning. We can easily implement that. But the biggest challenge is making the interoperability and the data collection at real-time is the first challenge. Once we do that, then it becomes easier to do it.
Okay, thank you, Suresh. And Alan, you were giving 3 points, and we had to move on. But I see we gained like probably about 20 seconds. So can you finish your 3rd point on things that disrupt the supply chain?
Yeah, I can. From the standpoint of supply chain, it really has to do with relationships with your vendors, your customers, and having a collaborative type of an environment to work with. So if you are connected with the folks that you do business with. There's a level of trust that comes out of that, and that allows you to be able to have some flexibility. So when you're talking to your vendors, you're talking to people that you do business with. And then the other thing that's really important as part of all of that is how much visibility do you really have? Do you have end-to-end visibility within your system? So when I talk about an integrated supply chain, it's really about, do I have the right data? Do I know what's going on within my systems? Can I get the information quickly? Or do I have to go log into 3 or 4 or 5 different systems? Or am I just running everything off Excel and I'm really not using the ERP system to its greatest advantage? So those are some other issues that I think you need to address when we talk about disruptions and how do we kind of reduce or mitigate some of that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. Okay, and I see some of the questions we've been getting to be very specific, but I see a new one came in that I think we can actually, every person can take a stab at. The question is, any advice for the new startup? So let me start with Jerry. So Jerry, do you have any advice for a new startup?
Yeah, I worked for a startup for a short period of time, and understanding the need for your product is pretty critical. You can have the best supply chain in the world, but if there's not a market for the product you're looking to sell, then that's going to be pretty challenging. So obviously that's a good focal point.
Okay, awesome. And then Michael, any advice for a new startup, for a new manufacturing startup?
Yes, I'm working with a gentleman right now that started his own business and came from the other side of the equation. So becoming now an owner is a whole different field. One of the first things is unfortunately his life insurance. He went ahead and bought a building. He owns a business. He needs to make sure he insures that. And so insurance is one of the key things with new startups. We're also trying to work with them in terms of hiring new employees down the road and also putting aside and having a plan for his own retirement someday.
Okay, good stuff. And then Bob.
Well, best advice for a startup from my perspective is do your homework. Make sure that you understand the market, make sure that you understand your suppliers, and don't be afraid to ask for advice. Look outside your organization and find someone that can give you direction and guidance based on their own experience, so you don't have to make mistakes that you could avoid.
Okay. And then Suresh, what advice would you have for a new manufacturing startup?
Sure. As far as startup is concerned, there are many challenges. It's a very broader question, but like many of you have already told, the first thing is to understand the feasibility of the product and how you are going to handle the production supply. How are you going to really market it? There are many challenges we need to really address. But beyond all that, I would say that before you start anything, take the help of some startup advisors, understand what you are getting into. That's very, very critical for you, especially when technology is really advancing so fast. The factory manufacturing itself is going towards a smart factories. Always get some help, understand where you stand. You don't want to start something which is 10 years behind. So that's my advice. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Len. And some people may not know, in addition to, Suresh also helps companies with technology as a startup advisor. So a lot of companies go to him to leverage technology when they're launching their new business from a technology perspective. It looks like the common theme is, get expert help, and I fully agree with that. So let me take a stab at answering the question. I would say do things right the first time, and this I think ties into what everyone else is saying. Find some expert advice. With technology has moved so far so well, and it's not as expensive as people think anymore. Figuring out how to, and then I'm really, data is really to me the key focus. Set up your operations so that your data flows correctly, so that you have all your processes in place, so that you're not creating silos of data. And these are things you can upfront look at, take a real long hard look, find the proper technology platform, talk to the right people, like Alan, and figure out, how do I get my data so that a year, 5 years down the road, having all types of issues where you have to start making systems talk to each other and so on, where you could have avoided it by just looking at things strategically. So that would be my advice would be, start, really, do the investigation and then figure out, do things the right way up front. Okay, and then next, Bill, what would be some advice you would give to a new manufacturing startup?
First off, everything takes twice as long as you think it's going to take to get everything set up and ready to go, and it costs significantly more. Thus, leaning on folks like Bob and his team to get you best pricing across the board, because you probably don't have a lot of experience getting the various things that you need yet. And to dovetail on David's comment, if you can't afford to do it right, you definitely can't afford to do it over. So, but having said that, I will also tell you, you need to be able to afford to be around for year 2 and year 3 in order to make it to year 5. So definitely conserving cash and plan, and the best laid plans, be prepared to roll up your sleeves and work some super long hours pulling everything together and getting that first product out the door. And there's been manufacturing plants I've worked with that never even got to the product out the door. So definitely start small and scale.
Good stuff, Bill. And Alan, what would be some advice you would give to a manufacturing startup?
Well, number one, I would say find a niche. Find something that you're really, really good at, that you can do better than just about anybody else. And that's where you start. What is is it my connection, or do we lose Alan?
I think Alan
Alan
froze.
froze up.
Yep, we lost Alan.
Okay, well, we'll save the question for him. And so I see another.
Understated. I'm still here. I'm here.
Okay.
Am I still there?
Yes,
Okay.
we lost you for
Back.
maybe about 10 seconds.
Am I back?
We can hear you now.
Okay, good. So I was going to say, finding a niche, finding something you do better than anyone else. And that's a great starting point. So when we started our business a little over 20 years ago, we decided that integrations was a key area that we could specialize in. So from a manufacturing perspective, there's a lot of manufacturers out there. Do not compete on price. Try to find something that actually provides real value to your customers, and find out what that is, and then use that as a differentiator when you go to market, so that you can obviously win business based on some of those features and capabilities of your company. So, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Alan. So that's a really good question. Okay, so the next question that came in, let's see, and this is for Suresh. How soon can a small manufacturer expect to see an ROI?
Again, it depends on many factors. It's very hard to say how long it takes. Depends on the sector, what kind of manufacturing you do. So I would say that, let's have a one-on-one chat and we can figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, with anything technology, it's really comes down to the business case. Yeah. Putting that together, and I think any one of us here would be happy to help figure out ROI capability, ROI schedules based on how your business operates and so on. So that's a good answer. The next one is for Jerry. So Jerry, what resources do you have at your disposal to help manage price increases?
Okay, yeah, thanks, David. So I'm going to talk about lumber first. I mean, that's our largest buy by a big margin, and we spend about $1.5 million annually in North America on our lumber. So we have access to the Random Lengths lumber pricing guide, and while it's not concrete, it gives historical and as close to real-time data as we can on predictors and things of that nature to help us gauge when we might expect to see increases in lumber. So that's a helpful tool for our operations folks. And I want to kind of touch base back on what Alan mentioned earlier, but we view our relationships with our vendors as partnerships, and I rely on them a lot. If I've got a 6-month project that I'm working on and I've got a set pricing, with my customer, I need my vendors to also pass that through to me as well, where I shouldn't expect to see any major price increases on some of that material that may impact what I'm dealing with on the pricing for my customer. So again, we utilize those as partnerships more than just relationships, and that really helps manage those expectations with our customers as well. Another thing that we can do is we buy in bulk as often as possible. So we have product on hand during a price increase per se, and we bought that at an older price. It helps mitigate some of those increases as well. So those are some of the things that we can do.
Okay, and I think Jerry, Nate has a question for you in the chat that I think you might be able to respond directly to him. But it sounds like what you're saying is if someone's trying to find yourself a partner like you or any of us, make sure that the partners are doing the right thing to mitigate costs, like buying in bulk and negotiating.
Correct. Right.
So
one other thing that we can do also that helps is we have access to make our own boxes and our own bags. So we can buy, larger sheets of raw material versus stocking, certain, stock item sizes, like different size boxes and things. We can make our own, so we get a little bit better pricing on the larger raw material that way.
Okay, and then the next question looks like it is for me. Should we try to integrate the systems we have, or try to find one that does everything? That's probably one of the biggest, like always, the biggest decision the company has to make is, they have all these silos, and do we try to find one size fits all? Do we try to get best of breed and find maybe replace a series of them with a few systems, or do we do a full integration and it's, as Suresh would say, it depends. It really comes down to price, time, and resources that you have, and that's part of that evaluation process that most IT companies I think who know what they're doing, most implementation companies who know what they're doing will do. They'll come in and they'll do a full evaluation, and then once you gather all that data, it starts to, and then, again, business case, what budget, what are we trying to solve? Based on all that information, that's how you would be able to determine what the best approach would be. Okay. And then the next question is for Bob. Bob, are there certain commodities where timing is right for procurement?
Absolutely, that's a great question. The price of steel is trending down currently, but availability has been adversely affected as far as catching up on prior orders has taken precedence. So there are still challenges. You need to pay attention to where you can make the biggest bang for your buck, and pay attention to the markets to ensure that you are going after pricing at the right time. And going back to what Jerry said, lumber and pallets, after appearing to be returning to normal, lumber prices are rising again. Wood pallets, both new and lumber recycled, continue to be supply constrained. Very few pallet suppliers are taking it on any new business. Instead, they're simply trying to keep up with the demand for existing customers.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Bob. And then the next question goes to Alan. What does an integrated digital supply chain look like, and how can I increase visibility and reliability in my processes?
Thanks, David. That's a good question. What I would say is that you got to start with your requirements. So you talk about what do we need to do every day, and what does the system need to do to support what we do from an operational standpoint? And then once you've determined what those things are, can we document all of that? So that's the starting point for any kind of discussion regarding supply chain or an integrated type of a digital supply chain. Once you've actually sat down and captured that information, that's a great place to start. And then you get into, now can we do a gap analysis? Can we look at the functionality that we currently need versus what we've documented, and is there a gap there? And can we identify what those gaps are? Once you've gone through that, then you start to do a cost benefit analysis. You start looking at, how do we close some of those gaps? How do we determine if it's an upgrade from our current application software, maybe to a whole new system possibly as a replacement, or can we just kind of migrate to a newer, type of a release of the software? So those are other things that you consider. Look at your viable options that are out in the marketplace. So you're looking at, of course, all the key things: time, resources, and cost. How much time would it take to implement a new system? You know, do we have the resources internally? Do we need to hire a consultant to help us through that process? And then what's it going to cost us, you know, overall? And when are we going to start to see the time to value? So once you've done that, you want to really eliminate as many of the manual types of tasks that you have within your company today. Try to automate as much as you possibly can. It reduces errors. It gives people more information quickly. And it also takes away some of the redundancy that's out in the industry. So, and it also removes some of the silos that we were talking about, you know, several people have talked about today. And lastly, I'm going to say use technology. You know, how can we upgrade the customer experience? That could be either through a portal, through some kind of invoicing. How do we do automate the purchase order process? Are there other ways to be able to get closer to our customer and give them the right experience so they want to come back and do more business with us in the future? So, you know, from an integrated supply chain perspective, all of those things come together, and now you have what you need to have that end-to-end visibility that I talked about.
Okay, perfect. And the next question is for Bill. Bill, are there any other use cases, or are there any, I like the word use case, but are there any other uses for this RFID technology?
Oh, thanks, David. Yeah, there's actually a number. It was originally developed for tracking stuff. So whether you're trying to track employees or other uses, it's used often in tracking your various components as they're going through your manufacturing facility, as well as tracking, you know, even after it leaves the facility, once it gets to distribution and other locations. And depending upon the type of RFID technology you use, it can actually have GPS embedded into the RFID tag to allow it to continue to track, you know, anywhere, not just within your plant, or within your distribution facilities, but even on the way to the distribution facility, all the way to the end user or customer.
Okay. And then the next question is from Michael. I want to offer a retirement plan for my employees, but my accountant says that they cost too much and I can be sued.
That was a familiar response from a lot of folks. We're trying to attract employees. We're trying to keep employees. And there's plans I mentioned earlier, a simple plan that is very low cost to start up. I've even done companies where they did volunteer IRAs or Roths. They were able to do it for as little as $50 a paycheck, and there was no cost to set those up. There's too many options today that goes away. And also there's opportunity to do alternative medical or benefits in terms of their insurances, life insurances, things like that. Employees want them. And in many instances, the employer does not have to pay for it. It can be payroll deducted. So there's many ways to keep employees and attract new employees.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michael. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I think we have enough time for one question each. So let me check. The next one goes to me. What are some of the roadblocks that you've seen in your experience? Two big ones are, first, old systems, siloed systems that are already embedded in place and working. They all had business cases, and they're trying to make the return. And so coming in and, even though they're clearly causing problems, trying to figure out a way to move past those systems that are already in place and replace them with something that brings more value. That's always a little bit challenging. And then also embedded with that issue is most people are reluctant to change. And a lot of times for good reason. A lot of promises have been made that things will improve, and then terrible systems have been put in, and so they've kind of been burnt a few times. So when there's this new initiative to say, like, let's fix this problem, let's do this new thing, there's a little bit of fatigue there in place. And the way at least I've had success getting around that is to always involve the stakeholders in discussions, understand their perspectives and their objections, and then show them how they can be addressed. So, but those are like the two top things that I have seen. The next question is for Bob. Bob, all things being equal, how can I ensure that I'm getting the best bang for my freight dollars spent?
Thanks for the question. It is that is also something that's really timely. The first thing is to stay in touch with the market. Sometimes it just comes down to pure negotiation with current and new suppliers to keep competitive pressures on. Consider operational improvements that may reduce costs outside of your negotiations. Use contracted rates and be prepared to rebid to keep suppliers honest over the course of your contract.
Okay, excellent. And then Bill, what is the typical return on investment for this type of technology deployment? I'm assuming RFID.
Yeah, so number one, I wouldn't do any investment that you're not getting your return within a couple of years. So if you have one employee that you're trying to figure out where they always are, this is not the right technology. The right technology is showing them the door and finding an employee that will show up. But when you have 50, 80, 100 that you're trying to track down all the time, now this technology can bring value, and now it will typically deliver a return. Oh, gee, was probably within 12 months, maybe 18 months. And sometimes, depending upon the issues, less.
Okay, wow, that's less than 2 years is pretty good. The next question goes to Suresh. Suresh, I guess with one of the projects you're working on, how long does a typical engagement last?
Again, like I said, it all depends on where the state of the manufacturing firm and where they are in terms of data collection. What are the systems they have already integrated. So we have to really look into it in detail. So I would definitely ask them to connect with us, and we can look into that.
And I guess just maybe just a quick tag on to that. What would be like a prerequisite that they are in the process of collecting data from the machines? Is that usually a good place where you get involved, or do you help them with the data collection?
The first step
what does
is
the
always,
simple engagement look like? As just maybe in a few sentences.
the first step is always making the systems integrated, and then getting into the interoperability and introducing the machine learning part of it. So it's a step-by-step process, and again, like I said, it depends on the size of the company and things like that. But it's not just engagement one time and leaving. It's kind of a continuous process. It may take even a couple of years sometimes to get to where you want to be. In most cases, in where we are today in manufacturing. So yes, it's a long process. It's a long process as of the manufacturing culture is concerned in the country. Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. And Michael, I think this one goes to you. The Secure Act in 2019 has many new changes for employers. Did Congress help business owners in this plan?
Yes, there's extended credits for starting a plan, starting a retirement plan. The reduced benefits by having pooled plans and multiple employer plans, MEP plans are also part of that. It'll save up on startup costs, save on continuing the plan, a lot of tax deductions to do that. The government wants employers to have more of a hand in that. So they're talking even about possibly here in the future is having a government run that all employers that don't have a plan would have to, more than 50 folks would have to start a retirement plan, but they can be done very inexpensively with all the tax law changes.
Okay. And Alan, how can I keep my customers happy in today's world?
Boy, that's a big question, David. Thanks. It's a good question. It's also a tough question because obviously things are different, for customers around the world. I would say you start with expectations. You know, what's reasonable, what's achievable, and start there with your customers, and and be honest with them. Don't tell them something and then do something else. So follow through with what you say you're going to do. Respond to the email. Follow up on the phone call. Do all the things that you need to do to make sure that communication is wide open with your customers in terms of what your issues are. And look at the outcomes. What are they focusing on? What do they need to happen? And how do you work backwards from that in terms of lead times and the things that you need to do to talk about delivery, for instance, with some of your customers. So how do you work through that? The other thing I think is talk about contingencies and options. So what other sources can you go to? What kind of flexibility do you have in your supply chain yourself so that you're not going to disappoint your customers? So, keeping them happy is very, very important. It's the key to every company's business. And so how do you achieve that, with having options to be able to go to quickly? Another thing I think to talk about is obviously this customer-centric approach. So, what's important to them, not what's important to you. And if you start there, I think you've got a much better chance of being successful in the relationships. So you build that trust, you build the relationship, and you do it based on performance. So if you've always performed on time, you've always delivered when you say you're going to, if there's a hiccup in the supply chain, a lot of customers are going to be more forgiving, in that situation, because they know that over time, you performed extremely well as suppliers then. And the last thing I said, is, be proactive rather than reactive. So the more you know about your supply chain, the more you know about your systems and the information that you need to be able to support your customers, the better you are prepared to be proactive in that situation rather than have something, catch you, off guard. And now you have to react to something like, for instance, you said something's going to be there on Wednesday. It's not there on Wednesday. Now you have to expedite everything. That's additional cost, time, energy that you didn't have to expend if you already had some pre-knowledge in terms of what was going to be happening. So I would say all those things relate to customer experience, to your relationships, and obviously keeping your customers happy so they continue to do business with you.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Alan, and thanks everyone. I think this was a really informative panel discussion. And then we're planning to have another one later this year. So, as usual, we'll post it on LinkedIn and let you know when it's coming. And if you have actually, any ideas for topics that you think might be something you want the panel to discuss, feel free to share that with us. And all these are topics, we could barely even do any justice to them in the short time that we all had, but I think everyone did a really good job. So if you have any follow-up questions or any follow-up discussions, feel free to reach out to any of us through LinkedIn or emails. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great remainder of the week.
Thanks, David.
Thanks,
David.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.